He was supposed to be WWE's next big powerhouse. Arenas full of thousands of fans were chanting his name. He was on his way to the top of the wrestling world. But today, Ryback isn't wrestling in front of thousands. In fact, he's not even wrestling at all. In 2021, Ryback ran a poll on Twitter asking his fans which wrestling promotion they wanted to see him return to. The options were AEW, NXT, Impact, and Retirement. Retirement won with over 65% of the votes. That should have been a sign. But Ryback couldn't take the hint. Instead, he kept digging his own grave and embarrassing himself until there was nothing left. From the bright lights of wrestling arenas to becoming a Twitter troll, Ryback's downfall has been absolutely tragic. So, how did Ryback go from almost becoming WWE champion to becoming the most disliked man in wrestling? What were the controversies and scandals that ruined his legacy? And what was the final nail in the coffin that ruined his life forever? Let's find out. Ryan Reeves was born in Las Vegas in 1981, and from an early age, wrestling was his passion. He started lifting weights at 12 years old. He excelled at baseball and football in high school, briefly played college baseball, then pivoted entirely toward his true dream. In 2004, he sent in a 1-minute video audition for the Tough Enough reality series and made it all the way to the final 8. He didn't win, but he impressed enough people backstage that WWE signed him to a developmental deal anyway. What followed was years of grinding through the developmental system. By 2008, he had won the OVW Heavyweight Championship briefly and earned a second developmental deal. He was repackaged as Skip Sheffield, and by early 2010, he was selected as one of 8 contestants for the very first season of NXT. And what came next changed the landscape of WWE. On June 7, 2010, Sheffield and 7 other NXT rookies invaded Monday Night Raw in one of the most shocking moments in the show's history. They dismantled the ringside area, destroyed the announcer's table, and laid out everyone in their path. The group became known as the Nexus, and for a brief moment, professional wrestling felt unpredictable again. Sheffield was part of it, but in a faction that also included Wade Barrett and a young Daniel Bryan, he struggled to stand out. And then, just 2 months later, he broke his ankle. He needed surgery and was put on the shelf for over a year. By the time he recovered, the Nexus had already run its course, and Skip Sheffield no longer existed. He would have to start all over again. But what came next was something nobody could have expected. In April 2012, Ryan Reeves arrived in SmackDown with a new name, a new look, and a new character, Ryback, a physically imposing monster who crushed local talent, and the crowds ate it up almost immediately. Over the next several months, Ryback went on a winning streak, primarily built on squash matches against jobbers. The formula was simple, and it worked. The crowd was loud, the chants were real, and for the first time in years, Vince had an organically over powerhouse in his hands. The comparisons to Goldberg were instant and relentless. Same kind of undefeated streak, same kind of explosive energy, same kind of short, devastating matches. Within months of debut, Ryback was being positioned in a championship program against CM Punk, who at that point was deep into his legendary 434-day title reign. The jump from squash matches to the main event scene happened almost overnight, and for a while, it genuinely felt like Ryback could be the next big thing. What made this particularly remarkable is that his merchandise numbers were climbing fast. According to Ryback himself, there was a moment backstage when a merchandise representative showed him his sales figures, and they were rivaling the top guys like John Cena and CM Punk. He recalled Punk walking over, seeing the numbers, and something visibly shifting in his demeanor. Whether or not that's the full story, what came next was the beginning of the end of Ryback's rocket ship push, and the start of a downfall that would define the rest of his life. Hell in a Cell was supposed to be Ryback's big night. He had the momentum, the crowd, and seemingly the moment. But a crooked referee named Brad Maddox turned on Ryback and handed CM Punk the win. Then, at Survivor Series, The Shield appeared for the first time and triple powerbombed Ryback through the announce table, costing him yet another shot. The losses were always by interference, always by outside circumstances, which in theory should have protected Ryback's credibility while building toward an eventual payoff. But the payoff never came. Instead, a slow and steady drift down the card began. He lost to Mark Henry at WrestleMania 29. He entered a brief feud with John Cena. He was briefly positioned as a Paul Heyman guy alongside Curtis Axel. He turned heel, turned face again, turned heel again, and each time the crowd responded less, and the momentum faded further. The Wrestling Observer newsletter had already voted him the most overrated wrestler of 2012. Live crowds weren't loud for him anymore, but nothing hit as hard as what came next. In November 2014, CM Punk appeared on Colt Cabana's Art of Wrestling podcast. He had just walked out of WWE earlier that year, and he was in the mood to say everything that had been building up for years. Among the targets was Ryback. Punk called him a steroid guy. He said wrestling Ryback took 20 years off his life. He accused Ryback of being reckless and dangerous in the ring, claiming Ryback had broken his ribs. The wrestling world largely believed every word. CM Punk had an enormous following and a reputation for telling the truth, even when it was uncomfortable, and his words landed like a sledgehammer on Ryback's reputation. Ryback pushed back, of course. He maintained that he was as careful with Punk as he had been with anyone, pointing to Punk's constant injury issues as his own fault. But the damage to Ryback's reputation was already done. By 2015, Ryback had won his one and only Intercontinental Championship, then lost it to Kevin Owens. By early 2016, he found himself on the pre-show of Payback, losing a United States Championship match to Kalisto in CM Punk's hometown. He went home shortly after, and on his Tumblr blog, he laid out his case. He was being paid less than others despite having to lose just as often. The outcomes were predetermined, so there was no logic in paying winners more. WWE had blocked him from outside opportunities, and the promises that had been made to him were never kept. He asked for a better deal, but he didn't get one. Instead, in August 2016, WWE released him. The parting was messy, bitter, and final. And rather than quietly moving on, Ryback started talking, and he never shut up. After leaving WWE, Ryback did two things almost immediately. He started wrestling on the independent circuit, and he launched a podcast called Conversations with the Big Guy. And from the very first episode, it was clear that Ryback wasn't going to use it the way most people do. Instead, he used it as a place to settle scores and talk trash about the WWE. On the independent circuit itself, he worked a handful of matches across various smaller promotions between 2016 and 2018. His last match was in August 2018 at a small indie show. There was no fanfare. There was no announcement that it would be his last match. It just quietly became the last time Ryback ever competed professionally. Meanwhile, the podcast kept going, and the targets kept multiplying. If Ryback's in-ring career ended with a quiet fade, his post-wrestling life was anything but quiet. What followed his WWE departure was a years-long social media campaign that managed to turn nearly every remaining ally into an enemy. In early 2017, on his podcast, Ryback went after John Cena with a level of intensity that genuinely surprised people. He called Cena a poison to the wrestling industry and a piece of garbage. He accused Cena of burying Alex Riley backstage for no good reason. He blamed Cena personally for the Nexus being buried, arguing that Cena refused to let the faction get over because it would have threatened his position. He even theorized that Triple H created NXT specifically as a way to get around what he called the Cena problem. Then came 2018. During a live Instagram session, Rusev was taking questions from fans when Ryback appeared in the comments. Rather than greeting him normally or moving on, Ryback asked Rusev directly and publicly whether he was using performance-enhancing substances. Rusev was understandably furious, calling Ryback out for being completely out of line. By 2020, the targets had multiplied. Ryback mocked Dolph Ziggler and took a shot at Triple H in the same breath. In 2021, he turned his attention to Mark Henry. Henry, who is not known for backing down from a confrontation, responded publicly and directly. He also called Ryback difficult and dangerous to work with, the same language CM Punk had used years earlier. Around that same time, Ryback ran a poll on Twitter asking his own fans which wrestling promotion they wanted to see him return to. The options were AEW, NXT, Impact, and Retirement. Retirement won with over 65% of the vote. That number alone should have told him something, but it didn't. Then came April 2022, and what most people would agree was the lowest point of Ryback's public life. Vince McMahon's mother passed away at the age of 101. The wrestling community, even people who had serious grievances with Vince McMahon professionally, largely kept their thoughts respectful or stayed quiet entirely. Ryback did neither. He posted a deeply offensive tweet, attacked Vince's difficult childhood, and signed off with a message berating the chairman. The response from the wrestling community was swift and unified. People who had defended Ryback in the past, people who had given him the benefit of the doubt over years of controversy, drew the line here. Even fans who genuinely agreed with some of his criticisms of WWE found the tweet unnecessary. He eventually deleted the tweet and issued an apology months later, claiming he had done it out of rage over the financial strain of his ongoing trademark battle with WWE. He said he had actually met Vince's mother in person and that she was a kind woman, but the damage was already done. The CM Punk obsession continued to simmer throughout all of this and boiled over again multiple times. Ahead of WrestleMania 40 in 2024, with Punk doing press appearances and enjoying a genuine comeback moment, Ryback was on social media calling him an egotistical, lying, manipulative coward. Running parallel to all of the social media chaos was a quieter but equally bitter battle. When Ryback left WWE in 2016, he discovered that WWE owned the trademark to his ring name. He filed for his own trademark in 2019 and began a years-long fight to reclaim it. By early 2023, Ryback had officially won, and the trademark was his. But by then, it was too late for a wrestling comeback. Because while all of this was happening, his body had been quietly falling apart. The ankle he broke in 3 places back in 2010 had started a chain reaction of damage that spread to his back and his right shoulder. He eventually revealed that he had been told he needed a 5-disc spinal fusion and a full shoulder replacement. He underwent more than 20 stem cell procedures on his back alone and spent years in rehabilitation. As of early 2026, his shoulder remains unresolved, and he is not medically cleared to wrestle. Behind all the anger and the online noise, there is a man whose career was cut short not just by booking decisions and politics, but by a body that simply gave up. It would be easy to look at Ryback's story purely as a cautionary tale about bitterness, and there is certainly enough material for that. But the full picture is messier and more human than that. The wrestling world he so desperately wanted to be a part of since childhood has moved on without him. No major promotion came calling after he left WWE. No return match came into existence. The body gave out before the bridges were rebuilt. While some members of the Nexus went on to become world champions and commentators, Ryback became a forgotten name in the world of wrestling. And if you want to find out what happened to every member of the OG Nexus, check out this video next.